in the dark, and we're going to chant the Sandokai, but I have a note that I'm going to read you this first, so we'll see whatever I was thinking when I marked this passage. I was drawn to bring forward the Sandokai, which is it's chanted daily in Soto Zen temples all over the world. That in itself is kind of wonderful that we're aligning ourselves with temples and practitioners all over the world. Soto Zen. And as a core teaching, it feels so fundamental in this time that we're living. There is the many. I just thought of a koan, or maybe it's Dogen's writings, when the 10,000 things, something like when the 10,000 things come all at once. It's like life, alive, the news. Oh my goodness. Like it, don't like it, good, bad. What should you do? And as I remember, Dogen's response is don't try to control it. But what is this? Don't control it. Doesn't mean be passive. Doesn't mean to be batted around. What is it? This not controlling, this no zazen that is dynamically, intimately alive and responsive. So I'm just going to start with this. This is Suzuki Roshi. Something that he says he's very much interested in. Traditionally, as you may know, Buddhists say that Buddhism will not last forever. The sutras give various lengths of time, but usually they say it will perish 1,500 years after Buddha's death. I think maybe this jumped out at me because I think there's lots of questions these days about democracy. And is it going to live? Is it not going to live? So we'll see what they say about Buddhism. We seem to still be here. According to tradition, in the first 500 years, in the time of Buddha's great disciples or grand disciples, there would be great sages like Buddha. This is Shobo, the time of the Buddha. In the next 500 years, there would be people who practice Zazen and study Buddhism. This is Zobo, the time of Dharma imitation. So in other words, we're sort of doing it, but it's not like the real deal. We're just kind of making it up and following along. Now, in Mappo, the last period beginning 1,000 years after Buddha's death, people would not observe the precepts. Can you imagine living in a time, being very facetious here, where people are not following the precepts? I mean, including us, but we just seem to be in a time where there's some question about truth and how do we be with ourselves and each other. So in this time of Mappo, they would read and chant sutras, but they would not be interested in Zazen, in practicing deeply, in looking deeply, in feeling deeply, in waking up together. People who practice Zazen and understand the teachings would be difficult to find. This is true, actually, Suzuki Roshi said, probably, well, he said it in the 70s, so some time ago, but continues to be true. People today do not observe the precepts. We forget. We get a little self-centered. Yeah. In Mappo, this time of decline or absence of true practice, people would be involved in the ideas of emptiness and being, and the ideas of compassion, and the ideas of waking up and of being bodhisattva ideal and of being here with and for all beings. But they would not understand what is really meant by that. Suzuki Roshi says real emptiness, real understanding, deeply experiencing alive, is experienced by practice. So the purpose of the Sandokai is to make clear what this practice is, what emptiness is, what many and oneness is, what being is, what darkness is, what clarity is, what the true source of the teachings is, and who the various beings are who are supported by the true source of the teachings. So you may ask, I hope you do ask. I hope we continue to ask forever. What is the real teaching of Buddha? If you don't understand it, you will keep asking, what is it? What is it? What does it mean? But pay attention, you may be just seeking for something you can understand, and that is a mistake. We don't exist in that way. Dogen Zenji says, there is no bird who flies knowing the limit of the sky. There is no fish who swims knowing the limit of the ocean. We exist, every one of us, moment after moment, in the limitless universe. Well, that might change our perspective a little bit. Sentient beings are numberless and our desires are limitless. But we still have to continue making our effort just as a fish swims and a bird flies. So Dogen Zenji says a bird flies like a bird, a fish swims like a fish. This is the Bodhisattva's way, and that is how we observe our practice. In this way, our practice is not disturbed by any framework of time or space. Our practice is not disturbed by good news, bad news, by anxiety, fear. Oh my goodness, what's happening? Fundamental teaching is Buddha is always here. Buddha is always here. In some ways still, Buddhism exists, and when we really understand what Buddha meant, we are in Buddha's time. So what is it to be alive and awake in Buddha's time in 2025 when it can look like the whole world is crashing, or at least not agreeing with our view of how we hope we're going to care for each other? The Buddha is always here. What is that? So let's, we're going to chant. It's on page 8 in the chant books. We're going to put it on the shared screen. And I would encourage you as we chant. This is a poem. It's a poem that embodies its teaching. So give yourself to it and enter it. Enter it with your body, with sounds, the feeling in your belly, the sound resonating in the room and on screen. Just be Sandokai. Harmony of difference and equality. The mind of the great sage of India is intimately transmitted from west to east. While human faculties are sharp or dull, the way has no northern or southern ancestors. The spiritual short shines clear in the light. The branching streams flow on in the dark. Grasping at things is surely delusion. According with sameness is still not enlightenment. All the objects of the senses interact and yet do not. Interacting brings involvement. Otherwise, each keeps its place. Sights vary in quality and form. Sounds differ, pleasing and harsh. Refined and common speech come together in the dark. Clear and murky phrases are distinguished in the light. The four elements return to their natures, just as a child turns to its mother. Fire heats, wind moves, water wets, earth is solid, eyes, sights, ear, the sounds, nose and smells, tongue and tastes. Thus with each and everything, depending on these roots, the leaves spread forth. Trunk and branches share the essence, revered and common, each has its speech. In the light there is darkness, but do not take it as darkness. In the dark there is light, but do not see it as light. Light and dark oppose one another, like the front and back foot in walking. Each of the myriad things has its merit expressed according to function and place. Phenomena exist, oxen fit. Principle responds, arrow points meet, hearing the words, understand the meaning. Do not set up standards on your own. If you do not understand the way right before you, how will you know the path as you walk? Progress is not a matter of far or near, but if you are confused, mountains and rivers block your way. I respectfully urge you to study the mystery. Do not pass your days and nights in vain. So the Sandokai is difference and unity, manyness and oneness, not as two things. I mean, of course, we perceive that way. But we perceive that way if we think that when we name something, we've got it. And then the minute we name something, it becomes a thing. And then we're setting up one thing against the other. And there's a beautiful saying, not one, not two. So what is this not one, not two? That's a dynamic interplay alive of manyness and oneness. That's not just the world of things that we're perceiving all the time. Like this happens and then that happens. And I'm over here and you're over there. And I like it and I don't like it. And of course, that's the world that we live in and that we perceive through the self. But maybe you have moments like last night stepping outside in the full moon. It's like, what is it? What's happening here that includes everything and excludes nothing? So one might say, from the point of view of oneness, the world feels spiritual or sacred. Maybe there's a feeling of at one-ment or a feeling of peace. And then, of course, we wonder what's wrong with ourselves or this other world, that we're in the world of many things that don't make sense often, that won't cooperate, that keep slipping through our fingers. So what if we keep returning to this swinging gate of, we don't have to choose. Alive is alive. And alive is exactly this particular. And it's also the entire world is Buddha's body. Beyond anything we can truly cognize or grasp, but we can taste in moments. What is this? Not one, not two. That Suzuki Roshi and Dogen would urge us to know through Zazen. You just sit down right in the middle of all of it. And I can feel my heartbeat. I can hear the clock. I can feel my breath. I've got thoughts coming and going, and I'll bet you do too. I've got sensations. This me. I can feel my knee. I can feel pent up anxiety and fear. I'm listening to the news, a collective sense. And I also can feel and experience simultaneously a really deep sense of stillness and quiet and one. Can you feel it? You feel it?
Yes.
It doesn't make sense in any kind of sequential way, which is, I was thinking today, it's why we need practice. It's why we need a steady practice. I mean, it's Zazen, but there are other, I mean, any practice that will take you all the way through. And it's also why we need Sangha and good spiritual friends. It's why the Buddha said, when Ananda asked, are good spiritual friends the important on the path? And the Buddha said, it's the whole of the path. We just so much need someplace to ground, to help each other remember. And as we remember, the whole world remembers, because there's nobody out there. So the phrases we're turning to tonight is: the spiritual source shines clear in the light, the branching streams flow on in the dark. Grasping at things is surely delusion, according with sameness is still not enlightenment. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit. When Suzuki Roshi gave these lectures, and I'm kind of following we're on the third lecture in the book. I promised last week I would look. There are Can somebody remind me? There are films, I'm pretty sure, of Suzuki Roshi teaching this I think at Tassajara. And he has one of those big whiteboards and he's writing things out and he's writing out characters. I mean, he's really serious about this. It's like he's come to America and he's going to transmit this to these people who I think, and I've heard from others, is I think he maybe had the feeling that in his own country, Japan, that Buddhism wasn't particularly alive. It had entered a stage of just kind of rote, and that all these crazy young hippies in the 70s really wanted to understand. And so he was like going to give it his whole deal. He wasn't like going to water it down. He's teaching this on a whiteboard about Chinese characters. So here's a little bit of what he said. So the radical, the Chinese character for spiritual source is clouds and water. I'm very visual. I like images. They really help me because they kind of bypass my thinking mind. The suggestion is a softness like a cloud, a moist cloud gently floating in the sky. And then the other part of the radical has a character that has in it the moon and the sun. And the moon and the sun together suggest a kind of subdued light, but not an intense bright light, a gentle glowing light. I always thought there's a reason that in Buddhism, the moonlight, it's different than sunlight. It's gentle and it's glowing. So clouds and gentle light are suggested in the character's spiritual source. And then the next two characters suggest purity. So spiritual source with a suggestion of glowing, and then the idea of purity, something gentle and lit, but not burning lit, but quiet and peaceful. Can you feel it? You're just here. Something quietly glowing, not pulsing, not doing anything, just quietly glowing. So the whole poem is built on, and it goes back and forth between wholeness and manyness and light and dark, and it gives you one thing and then it turns you upside down, which is what Dogen does in his teachings too. So it's very frustrating. I mean, it's very frustrating to the conscious mind because you think you just start getting something and then it gives you a line and it gives you something else. So the parallel to spiritual source is branching streams. But in Chinese, the words aren't actually streams. The word means branches in the sense of differentiations. It can also mean teachings and viewpoints, or sects, as in religious sects. So there's a contrast between softly flowing and all of these viewpoints and attitudes and things, the 10,000 things coming at us all at once. What's a human being to do? So the teaching is that ideas and things aren't fundamentally different from this soft glowing. They're just arising manifestations, appearing and disappearing simultaneously. It's like your mind can't get, it's like, how could all of this be appearing and disappearing simultaneously? And there being this quiet source and branching streams that are flowing and intermingling. Here's a translation. The gentle source shines pure, the proliferating branches darkened flowingly. I was thinking Zenju Earthling is trying and has been trying so hard to reclaim darkness. Like darkness is bad, black is bad. This is a beautiful reclamation of the front foot and the back foot, like darkness and light oppose one another like the front and back foot in walking. They're completely. How could you have one without the other? And then we watch how we set up one thing against the other. So what's great, and you'll see as we go on in the poem, which is why we're just going to keep reciting it, and which is why you could recite it at home. I'm going to stop soon and then we'll talk about something, but I keep wanting to just keep laying the ground here. Is it sounds like light is source and softly glowing, and dark is the many things flowingly, manifestingly darkened matter, thoughts, feelings. But then it gets completely flipped because they're transforming into each other. Suddenly, darkness is the darkness of. One of my first spiritual insights that I remember was I remember as a kid walking into a dark garage and flipping on the light, and there was nothing there, and suddenly everything was there. It's like, so darkness is oneness because you can't see it. It's dark. And light is what creates the discernment of this and that. So it just doesn't give you any place to rest. It just says, just keep going beyond and beyond. So this is the place. I remember Jack Kornfield saying early on, it went in really deeply, that a human body is a fear body. And I can feel it now. I can feel my fear, anxiety body. And in fact, I think there's a certain kind of maybe glee in stirring it up. Some people are really good at that. And I remember my first teacher, Richard Baker, saying these things go in and then you practice with it for decades. That if one person who is awake or of a bodhisattva impulse practicing not seeing separation or just beingness of being, walk through a crowded square with lots of confused people everywhere, kind of like now, that one person walking through would change everything. That somehow it's like a chemistry flask when you put in a little drop and it spreads everywhere. And I remember thinking, that's what I want to be. I want to know what that is. And I think that's what we all want to be, or we wouldn't be here. And we already are that, and everybody already is that. But this poem just says practice. Says there's nothing out there. When there's a problem, experience it, deal with it. And the pure source is nothing but each being. They're not two things. The pure source is flowing all over, even if you don't know it. This not know is what we call the dark. Not knowing is most intimate. The spiritual source shines clear in the light. Branching streams flow on in the dark. Grasping at things is surely delusion. I got it. Did you get it? What did you get? according with sameness. I got it. I'm chill, man. I'm so awake. Yeah, well, good. See what happens next. Take the next breath. So Suzuki Roshi called this chapter, "The Buddha is Always Here." Okay, so we've got a few minutes. That's what I would toss to you. You can talk about anything you want, but what's that mean to you? The Buddha is always here. And you can argue with it. You don't have to agree with it. But is there anything in this teaching that maybe I hesitate to say comfort because it's not where there may be a sense of rest or ease that isn't turning away, that isn't shutting down, that isn't some kind of spiritual bypass, but that is awake and alive and inclusive. So why don't you turn to somebody next to you, and I'll put you guys in groups. The Buddha is always here.